right, hello everybody. We're super excited today to be chatting with Brandon Kunka, the amazing Wendy Higdon, Vote William, the one and the only Robert Herrings, Kim Bain, Renee Todd.
You were going to teach me the oboe. What would you tell me to do? And they sort of fill me in on what they do and don't understand.
The most common issue with bass drum I see is where the performer actually stands.
First play one pitch, relax, and think about the embouchure and play the crow.
And modeling what they hear is a good sound because you've alerted them to what's a good sound. You have to educate the kids as to what a good tone on their instrument is, a characteristic sound. So that's our job.
Welcome back to the Growing Band Director Podcast. This is episode number 123. I'm here with composer, conductor, and self-publisher Tyler Grant. Tyler, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Kyle. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us about when did you start your company?
My company actually started, I like to say it's had two different starts. I originally started when I had started composing, and I know we'll get into my backstory a little bit later on, but when I started composing and publishing band music, I needed to find an outlet to publish some of my chamber music that I was writing while I was still a student. And so I originally started, Tyler S. Grant Music Works to self-publish a lot of that chamber music. So that was back in 2010, I believe. But I did not publish really any band music with it. And then in the middle of the pandemic was when I really decided to jump both feet in and go exclusively self-publishing. And so 2020 was when it sort of had its rebirth after that, and really started with the band music.
So on your website, tylersgrant.com, I also noticed there's a bunch of free resources and stuff as well. I think that's something a lot of composers and things are doing now. So what's on there for people?
Well, it's constantly changing. At the time that we're recording this, it has become the home to a bunch of videos that I've actually been filming. One of those I know we'll have a chance to talk about is the Teaching Tone series. And so that's the first thing is really mainly video content there, including I also at one point I started getting a lot of requests for people who are asking me to film an introduction for their concert. They like to put a big screen up with the composer's face, just giving a 1 or 2 minute introduction. And so I started to film some of those videos as well and put those up there for anybody who wanted them, even if they just wanted to show their students in rehearsal and put the face with the name and the person who's actually created the music. And then other resources that I've created that are on there are a lot of supplemental guides and rhythm and melody sheets that go with a lot of my music. Nowadays, every piece that I publish, I'm making sure that I go ahead and post a companion guide or that supplemental guide for that piece on the free resources page. But I've also gone back and gotten permission from my old publisher, FJH Music, to upload resource guides for At Twilight and Epic Venture, Shimmering Joy, some of my more popular pieces that that are still published under FJH Music.
That's so great. I love the companion guide. And on a couple of recent episodes, we've been talking about how to do companion guides to a piece if you're doing your own. And but to know that you have a lot of them for your pieces that people can get for free is pretty awesome.
Directors, I know from my time as a band director that time is very precious. And though I know many of us, we do anything we can to the thing that I love about band directors is that we will always go kind of above and beyond whatever we have to do to push our students to that next step or to that next level. And while I know that all of us would sit on our computer on a Sunday night trying to make companion guides for the week, I just try to make sure, if I've already got it in notation form, I might as well go ahead and create the companion guide for everybody and just save everybody that time. That's very valuable.
And it's so worth it, that it just helps you learn the piece so much faster.
It is. And the tuba players get a chance to learn all the melodies. I mean, I know there are several other composers that are really starting to do a better job of writing for, I'm a euphonium player by trade, by the way. And so I remember growing up and playing all those whole notes. And so for me, I would have loved to learn all the melodies in a piece, even though I'm playing a low instrument that maybe doesn't get a chance to play it as often as the trumpets or the clarinets. So yeah, it's just a lot of fun too. It makes the band better, engages everybody. It's all the while really special.
So I saw your series on Teaching Tone, and I watched some of those videos. It's fantastic work. First of all, how did you get? First of all, the idea, just the concept to do it, is brilliant. Secondly, how did you get all those masterful teachers to agree to spending that time with you?
I still kind of wonder that myself a little bit. The first idea that I had for this was actually while I was still a teacher. I was in my, it was coming out of the pandemic. I started teaching in 2019. My timing was perfect, right? You know, I had 6 months of air quote normalcy,
Sure.
and just had taken over as the band director at this private school here in Atlanta. And as soon as the pandemic hit, my circumstances were at actually where our school community was very progressive when it comes to the COVID protocols. So we basically the entire school year taught band outside in the parking lot, and we had the playing masks and everything. And I know, like many who taught remote and have done the outside playing or have used the playing masks, one of the first things that went out the window for band classes was just general tone production. Like it was something that as soon as we were able to really get back and teaching as closer to normal, that was the first thing I thought of, was that we got to be able to go back and fix all these bad habits with the kids. But I was also a young director, and so I didn't have the answers in my first and second year of teaching, but I especially didn't have the answers when I was coming out of COVID, and so that was when I first had originally had the idea, and along the way, of course, after just recently, I became a full-time composer, arranger, publisher, conductor, and I finally had the time this summer to really dedicate this and see this project through. And I was talking to my really good friend Aris Golden. She's one of the band directors at Michigan State University, but a very prolific middle school teaching career as well before she went to Michigan State. And I was talking with her, and I realized that I was just really lucky with some of the friends that I had, or just some mutual friends that I had in the profession. And as soon as I started pitching this idea to some directors like Robert Herrings or Darcy Williams or Tiffany Hitz or Renee Todd, any of these folks who are friends, but also just are very well connected in the band world. As soon as I mentioned this idea, they started to say, you know, this really is a need, not even just for young directors who might have not had a great methods experience, but if you're a band director who has a student teacher starting in the spring semester and they're teaching beginning band and they are a percussionist, and they don't know very specifically what needs to go into a tone production on a double reed instrument, or if they're very well versed on all the brass instruments, but they're very weak at horn. There's no resource out there that is very clear and concise that just gets everybody a good starting point for them to be able to build knowledge about their instrument pedagogy. And so the way I was able to get everybody to agree to it was, I think, just everybody in the series was very committed to seeing this resource through and making something special. As soon as I did the wind version, of course, the percussion ones came very quickly after that, and so I'm really proud of how it turned out. And you know, I obviously I'm the one who compiled everything, but at the same time I can't take credit for it, because it's an awesome roster of people who care so much about giving to other teachers, and we were glad to be able to do it and post it on YouTube and give it away for free.
Well, just the vision you have to be able to offer that, and yes, you need the people to do it. And you know, those teachers are some of the finest teachers in the country. And
their band programs are obviously fantastic, and they're wonderful teachers. And but again, if you talk to every single one of them, if you found them at your state MEA conference and walked up to them and asked them a specific question, they would be so giving to share that information. It's really, you know, it's not only just finding great teachers, it's finding great people too, which is equally as important.
Yeah, and what's great too is, like, somebody may not be looking at one of them right now because maybe they have a fantastic clarinet section and they don't have to deal with that, quote unquote, right? But in 5 years, when they go, wait a minute, the tide has changed in my clarinet section, I need to go back and remember how to teach tone, it's going to live there and it's going to be there. So it's more about having that resource, whether or not people want to use all of them now, but making them available for anybody who wants to.
Yeah, you're right. And it's what I found actually really special, kind of going back to this thing about how great these people are that are in a part of this series, was you see these names, I've already mentioned some of them, but you see these fantastic names, and you hear their bands playing at Midwest, and you hear their bands playing at state conferences and all these different venues, and when the series became available, they were the first ones to start going through and watching the other videos that they were not a part of, because they're all lifelong learners. And
Yeah.
I know we're going to talk about, some of the things that we think about when it comes to being a really effective band director. And when you have people like, Tiffany Hitz, who's did the horn video, who was so excited to jump in and learn more about the woodwind side, from Darcy and from Wendy Higdon and all these different people. It's just, it's really special that, I think everybody, all that to say, I think everybody, no matter what part of where you are in your profession, there's something to be learned in these videos. I know I learned a ton just producing them.
Well, and it's not a coincidence that they have great programs. If they have a growth mindset and they relate to people really well, like, you can see a lot
Absolutely.
of why they have great programs.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
So you were at, am I correct, University of Alabama?
Yes, I did my undergrad at University of Alabama, and my degree is in music education. A lot of people think that I double majored or just did music composition, and I did not. I did music education and then studied conducting through independent study with Randall Coleman while I was there. And so it was 4 very special years, and taught me a lot.
So when you look back on your upbringing, including college and before, who were some of the band directors that really affected you?
Well, the band directors that affected me first, of course, was Randall Coleman, because when I was as an undergrad, and by this point, and many people on here will know that I had my start as a composer very young. My first published pieces were out when I was a middle school student, in 7th and 8th grade, and so by the time I got to college, I already had quite a few pieces in my catalog that were published and being played regularly, and was getting the invitation to come and be in rehearsals and conduct. And so, Randall Coleman was somebody who, even though I was not a graduate student, he very much treated me like a grad student along with the rest of the conducting studio. And so I was able to be a part of a lot of different things. That whenever we had guest conductors that were in town, getting a chance to be around them and to be in rehearsals and observe. And so I'm forever thankful for Professor Coleman for doing that, because, as an undergrad, he did not have to do that. And it's just something that was an experience that greatly influenced the trajectory that I'm on right now. So at the university level, he was very, very big. At the high school level and the middle school level, I think anytime you look at somebody who has success, then it's the first thing we should think of is that they have really, really great teachers. And then, so I just was very fortunate in that. I started in band in 4th grade. We were lucky to have an elementary band program. And this music teacher, Marjorie Lee, who, if anybody here has ever played the piece At Twilight, they'll know that that piece is dedicated to her. She was the one who, in general music class, picked up on the fact that I had a very good ear and my brain was wired in a way that would, in her opinion, make me at least somewhat successful in music. And so she was the one who called my parents and said, Tyler needs to be in band. And they forced me into band against my will. I did not want to do it. And which I know I think it's always important for all of us to know that whenever we're advocating for a student to stay in band or to keep on their instrument because we feel really strongly, I'm a product of that. Because if my parents had listened to me, I would not have done music, and I don't even know what I would be doing now. But so Marjorie Lee, I owe everything to, because she had that vision to see into a kid and see the potential that I don't think my parents saw, and I certainly didn't see when it came to music. And so Marjorie Lee was big. Amy Moore, and when I went to middle school, she was the first band director who ever let me stand up on the podium and conduct the B flat scale, which again, it sounds so basic, but it life-changing for me, because I knew I wanted to be a band director before I even wanted to be a composer. And so, Amy Moore was fantastic for that. I spent a little bit of time at a private school and during my middle and high school years. And so I got to see, I was lucky because Aaron Paul Brown was the band director there, and the band program was small enough that I was able to step in and just try to help out in anything I could. So, and what I mean by that is if music needed to be photocopied, I got to have my hands dirty with all the sheet music, which, now that I'm doing self-publishing, I know what a piece should look like and feel like when it's printed. anytime that Mr. Brown was out, and sometimes he would let me step in and substitute teach beginning band, which at a small private school, again, a lot of us think, why in the world would you have a high school student, teaching your beginning band? Well, at a private school, you could, because it was a small enough school, and it was one of those things for me that the opportunity was there to really get my feet dirty, or sorry, you can scratch that part out. Sorry. It just was a great opportunity for me to get my hands dirty at a very young age, and learn about not only teaching band, but also writing for band for these developing musicians. And then the last director that I had, his name's Ryan Fitzpatrick, and several other assistant directors like Sally White and Dennis Carroll and Jeff Fondren, who I actually transferred to Hoover High School, which, if anybody's recognizes their name, their jazz program, their marching band competes BOA, but the jazz program has performed multiple times at the Midwest Clinic. They'll be performing here in a couple weeks. But I went from this very small private school band program immediately to playing in the top wind ensemble my senior year of high school at Hoover High School. And so I jumped from playing grade 2 and 3 repertoire immediately into playing Donald Grantham, playing John Mackey, playing Persica, like all these big name or big pieces. And so that was a huge culture shock for me, from going from the small school to a much larger and a little bit more of a competitive program. And so and Ryan Fitzpatrick was fantastic in letting me write for the groups and getting up in front of some of the second and third bands as well. And so I just was really lucky with teachers that, I think what's also worth mentioning too is that I was a euphonium player, and I practiced, and I made sure that I was doing what I needed to do to grow as a euphonium player and all through college. But I was not the student who was always sitting first chair. I was not the student who was making all state band, or was necessarily getting all the medals and awards for how well they were playing. And I always want to stress that to directors, because there are so many different types of learners in your band program, and your last chair trumpet player could be a fantastic composer, but all that to say, there's so many wonderful opportunities for students to be a part of music that are just outside of playing their instruments. So never dismiss those students that are not just in the first chair top ensembles in your programs, because that was never me.
I've had the same experiences. I mean, I've had maybe a dozen kids go into teaching over my career and become band directors and all that. And all the finest band directors that have come, that I was their band director, none of them were first chair. Well, some of them were, but many of them were not all-state players. One in particular, Haley Frankor, who's a young teacher. She's 25 right now. She's killing it. She does a great job. She was not, quote unquote, this standout musician. She was just a kid who really cared. And, what I love about your story is you have been given by your band directors, the biggest gift was just opportunity. It seems like you were given a chance to get your hands dirty, to do all the things and figure out if you really liked it, which clearly you did. And they let you learn.
Yes, and I think if you were to interview any of them, they would tell you that they had to really seek that out, and they had to. I don't think none of this would have worked if they were not the type of teachers that really cared about learning about the individual student. Mm-hmm. If I were just a number on a roster, I don't think there's any way they would have seen that. I was a very awkward child. I was a very awkward student. I was. At time, I just was a normal middle and high school kid who was sitting mid to low in the section, and I auditioned for all state band, and I tried my hardest. I never made it when I was a high school student, but now I've conducted how many all state bands across the country? I mean, it's those kinds of weird things that I think we always have to keep in mind when it comes to learning about our students and what their connection will be long-term to music. It may not just be playing their instrument. It might be playing in a community band and they're doing something else career-wise. But, I just was lucky with teachers like that,
Well, it was funny. I've mentioned this a couple times on different episodes, the famous Jan Feierabend and Jill Trinka. And they have all this method called conversational solfege and first steps in music and all this. But they talk about being tuneful and beatful and artful, and that we're raising people to be able to sing melodies to their child as they rock them to sleep, and dance in time at the wedding for their daughter's wedding. We even if they don't play their instrument later, you're creating so much positive humanity, so much empathy in them. Such a good person. Music does so much for us.
It does. I cannot remember who it was that told me at one point that, but it might have been a session at a convention or somewhere. But they always would talk about that if they don't ever go to a community band concert that's close by, if they don't have one that close by, then you might have to really seek that out. And there might be a good question there as to maybe why isn't there a community band? But when you see these folks who, one of the groups that I have a great relationship with here in Atlanta is the Atlanta Wind Symphony, and they do a lot of my reference recordings, and we collaborate on a lot of different things. But you just look out at this really top-notch ensemble that's playing all the great rep, all the grade 5 and 6 rep, and playing at Midwest Clinic, and the majority of that ensemble, they're not full-time musicians. And so there is a wonderful wealth of opportunities for our students to be lifelong appreciators of music. And I think we always, that's just something I tried to keep in mind when I was teaching was, I'm not trying to teach these students to all become conservatory musicians and to teach at Juilliard. I want them to be lifelong appreciators of music.
And if they don't go into music, that's okay. We're not disappointed when they don't go into music.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we were talking about preparing maybe a quick session here on traits of a good band director. We've already talked about a lot of it, right? You talked about being a perpetual learner, having that growth mindset. I will say, for people who are new to this podcast, the growing band director comes from that growth mindset. And Ray Kroc has a famous saying that says, when you're green, you're growing, and when you ripe, you're rot. And he was the creator of McDonald's. So that's sort of that was given to me by a mentor a long time ago, and that stewed in my brain for a long time before I took that and really ran with it with this podcast. So I love seeing the growth mindset stuff. You have a quote here: "They don't care what you know until they know you care."
Absolutely. That, and I think deep down, I will say one of the folks that's in the Teaching Tone video series was Kim Bain, and we're kind of going back to like people that I consider teachers and mentors. I just was so lucky with both of my student teaching placements, and Kim Bain, she, her middle school band program again played Midwest and state convention and all these accolades. But the thing that I was always struck by was when I first walked into her band room as an intern, my first assignment was learn every student's name.
Yeah.
And at first I remember thinking like, what? Like I was walking in thinking I was going to get some other type of assignment as the intern. But no, it's learning their name. And she held every intern. If you talk to any intern, she held you to task on that. By the end of the week, you were being asked, what's that student's name? If you were not in the band locker room when they're in between periods or in between blocks, whenever the students were getting their instruments out and striking up conversation with you, then that was a problem. And I just remember at the time I was thinking like, okay, this is not what I was expecting. But then when I started teaching, you can walk in. The reality of it is that I walked into teaching. I had already written a lot of music. I'd already conducted honor bands, and and I'm sure there's a lot of folks who would say, you probably shouldn't have been conducting honor bands if you'd never taught before. And there's some valid, thoughts there, and I'm not going to dispute that. But I walked in with for a first year teacher, a fairly impressive resume, and those students did not care because they don't care what you know until they know that you personally care for them. And so, I think obviously anybody listening to this, we're focused on growing. We're trying to learn all the things that we possibly can. And, and I think that's all fantastic. And if it doesn't always come from the place of, I care about you. And so because I care about you, let me tell you this cool thing that I learned about how to play your instrument better, how to, how we're going to play as an ensemble better. If it never comes from a place of caring, then it's very easy for the students to dismiss it. I promise you, they will, thinking about my former students now, I just had a chance to go to one of our local theater productions and see some of my former students. The things the impact that you have on them, they're not going to always remember those specific little nuggets of things that you've taught them, but what they do remember is that you cared about them. And so, and the byproduct of that is they'll probably be playing their instrument a little bit better too. But just come at it from the standpoint of like knowing that you care about them as an individual, not as I mentioned before, because I was lucky with these band directors that didn't just see me as a number on a roster. So yeah, that quote, and every single time I will say, every single time that I had an issue with a student, whether it was discipline related, whether it was I was trying to make some kind of adjustment to the way that they were playing, if I was ever struggling or getting frustrated with me not feeling like they were progressing at the rate that I would like, or they were not making the change that I would like, it usually always stemmed from, do they feel like I actually care about them, or that what I'm telling them is out of a place of care, or do they feel like I just care about them playing this one thing better? And so that was the quote that I just had to continue living by. Anytime I was frustrated, it was always coming from there.
Yeah, one of my favorite memories from my Midwest attendances that I've been at was one of the clinics with Dr. Tim. And he quoted Maya Angelou, that famous one that I think a lot of us know. What's the quote go? I forgot it now.
Was it connect before correct?
No, that's a great one. No, it was they won't remember what you taught them, but they will remember how you made them feel. And the way he did it in this clinic, I think it was 2007 or say a long time ago, is he said, and I'm going to show you that's proof. So everybody stand up. So we're in this ballroom in Chicago, and there's like 750 band directors, right? Orchestra teachers and jazz teachers and all the things. And he says, okay, we're going to sing Auld Lang Syne. Here's our first note. So we all sang Auld Lang Syne. Now imagine 750 music teachers singing Auld Lang Syne. It was like I get chills kind of thinking about it. And then we get to the bridge, and he just screams the word harmony. So then we have like 200-part harmony happening in this big ballroom that wasn't planned, and we all clapped afterwards. And he said, you're not going to remember almost anything I said in this clinic, but you're going to remember how it felt to be a part of that. And your students are exactly the same way.
Yep, exactly right. And it's the number of plates that we have to keep spinning as band directors is immense. And it's so, I just remember how easily I would, if I did not keep that at the forefront of, as a young teacher, but even right before I left teaching, if I did not keep that at the forefront of my mind when I was lesson planning, every email I would send, every interaction with a student, it was so easy for that to slip. And I it's hilarious that I'm the person sitting here talking about this on a podcast, because I'm sure if you ask my students, they could tell you all the times that I slipped and didn't keep that forward. But I just think if we don't do anything as teachers, we can sit here and disagree about, how we should be teaching this articulation, or how we should be teaching rhythm, or what book we should be using. We can debate that all day long, but at the end of the day, do your kids feel like you care about them?
Yeah.
So you're right.
You also mentioned it's important that we show them that we're well-rounded human beings.
Yep. When I started I walk into my first year teaching, and I knew so much about band. I knew so little about pop music. I knew so little about whatever was going on. I mean, I went to Alabama, and I could not tell you what was going on football wise, which, here in the South, that's a big deal. I live in Atlanta, and, we've got all these, it's just, you're in the heart of so much culture and so much pop culture that's around here. And I knew so little about it. And so, when you're trying to relate to your students, I don't think that you're going to sit there and be able to, tell them about the latest, Lincoln Posey recording that you listen to and expect to strike a conversation. And so, the more that I was well-rounded as a human, the more that I was able to relate what we were teaching in class to everyday life. And it sounds super obvious, but we are the perfect, we love our jobs, and we love our classes so much, and we love what we teach so much, that it sometimes can be a little bit of a double-edged sword for us. And I just know for me that I was a self-proclaimed workaholic, and I didn't let myself just, enjoy life and experience, the culture and everything that everybody else is experiencing. So yeah, that was a hard lesson. That was a lesson, I will tell you, up until right before I left. I feel like I finally started to make massive progress on. And COVID helped too, because, there was not much to do. I wasn't writing music. So, suddenly I learned, all these amazing Netflix shows, or I suddenly started listening to Taylor Swift, or like whatever, whatever they're actually listening to or doing.
Yeah, it's funny. As a parent of kids almost high school age, I get some of that as well. However, one thing, I had a teacher in college who always said, never live in the town you teach in. You don't want everybody knowing your business. I don't know. I completely disagree with him. For me, my wife and I live in the same town that we both the band directors in, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
The ability to be able to relate to kids when you see what their address is, where that is. So if you need to pick up their euphonium and bring it to them on a snow day, where they live. The ability to make cultural references just within your town, I think is huge. So if anybody's been told that, I lived outside of the town for the first 2 years. And then when we got married, moved into the town, and it felt totally different. It was like, even when I went to work, I didn't really feel like I left home, because I was in the same town. So I guess my lesson for that would be do what works for you, not what your college teacher says. I love you, Mark the Turk, but it didn't work for me.
I remember hearing that too. And I've done it both ways, because when I first moved here, because of the pandemic and a bunch of other life things, I was moving and around the city quite a bit. And I had a time where I lived 2 years or so where I lived basically 5 minutes from the school. And then I had at one point where I was living in downtown Atlanta. And then, right at the very end, I since moved to the burbs. And, because I taught at a private school, there was no geographic barriers. People lived everywhere. And so you really could not escape it. And running into my students at like the airport or on the subway coming back, I'll tell you what was great was the look on my students' face when I ran into them on the subway after the Taylor Swift concert when she was in Atlanta. And that, or when they, of course you run into them at the grocery store, that's always a very special thing. They're just, or my favorite was I was out at the park and I was going on a run, and they just were shocked that I was wearing shorts because they'd never seen my legs before. And they just thought that was, it's the things that middle school students, will latch onto. I think is just hilarious. But it's being about anything to connect with them. You're right.
Yep. So we're going to transition to featuring 5 of your pieces.
Okay.
We're going to do that in a second. Before we do, At Twilight, which you mentioned, is one of your more popular pieces.
Yeah.
I actually featured that first time I reached out to you. We put it in. So back in the summer, I did 6 episodes of grades 0.5 to 3. And I think it was episode, I'm going to test my memory here, 89, 91, 93, 95, 97, and 99. Yes. And we had this piece on episode 93. So I think this piece at Twilight, when it comes up here in a couple minutes, is going to be the first double run piece on the episode. So it's going to be cool.
I'm just impressed that you remembered all those numbers. I mean, I guess
I just remembered it started. It started at 89 and it was every other. I just remember that. But I also want to mention I've done this with a couple other composers, and it's super fun. I hope people enjoy this part of it. I did it with Laura Estes once and Paul Baker, the great jazz writer out of Texas, and I think some others. I'm just kind of blanking on them. But so for people who are not on YouTube, at some point jump over to YouTube and check it out, because we're going to have the score and sound on these as well, which people know they can do that on YouTube. Okay, the first piece we're going to highlight. First of all, this is 5 pieces, all at the grade 1, 1.5, or 2 level. I love music at that level. I mean, there's obviously so many bands who can access it there. I also am a firm believer that people should underprogram a little bit more and make spectacular music. That's sort of my gospel. So you say At Twilight is one of your most popular pieces?
It is. To this day, it might actually be the most popular. I think it's probably closely tied with Ghost of the Lost Ship. I think they're probably neck and neck. But just like you said about playing stuff at an easier level, what I love is that technically that piece on paper is a grade 1, but anybody who plays it, and especially a lot of the states that have put it on their state list, will list it as a 2, at least a 2. And so even if I'm doing an honor band where the group can play at a grade 2, 2.5, or 3 level, I may always just throw that in the folder just because it's good for teaching phrasing and musicianship and just a whole lot of different things that, as you mentioned, if they're just fighting the technique, there's a whole lot more that they could be diving into.
Yeah, I've
So-
also, I forget who I was talking with, but somebody who's an experienced teacher said, yeah, every ballad is hard. Every ballad's a grade 4, no matter what.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about the piece for people who haven't heard it before or don't know it.
Yeah, so this piece I mentioned earlier, I ended up dedicating it to my elementary band director. I actually premiered the piece with my elementary band. I got to go back and guest conduct this fourth and fifth grade band.
Super cool.
Just as my senior year of high school was actually when I wrote this piece and got to go back and do that. But yeah, this was a piece that I wrote for fun. This was not a commission. It was just me, my senior year of high school, wanting to write a lyrical and beautiful piece for young band. And I think even to this day, now that I've taught, it was one of those pieces where I think I'm glad that everybody embraced it, but really it was a piece that was ahead of my time, and for me to really realize exactly what it was that I was writing. But now that I've taught, I now understand everybody's appeal to the appeal of the piece to everybody. At the time, I thought, okay, it's just a slow grade 1 piece. Why is everybody, really embracing this piece? And now I realize that the things you can teach your students with it. And so, yeah, it just was a piece that I was writing for fun. I was actually on vacation, and at the time I was writing all my music on a laptop. And so I was on vacation. I was at the beach down in Gulf Shores, Alabama. And I was just sitting on the back porch, and I just basically sketched out about 30 or 40 measures of this piece. And as soon as I got home and I was able to, blow it up onto a full score, the piece kind of wrote itself very, very quickly. The full draft of the piece, I want to say, was done in about a day. And so yeah, this was one of those weird pieces that just kind of appeared out of nowhere for me.
That's awesome. All right, let's listen to it. Here's At Twilight. So the next piece is called 0 to 60. It's grade 1.5.
Yes, and it is a piece that I wrote. This is also another piece that was not a commission. I actually wrote this one at the end of the last academic year, and I wrote it for my own students. The pedagogical purpose of this piece is actually it's supposed to be a really fun and exciting way of teaching the chromatic scale. The piece comes with an entire set of exercises that really takes the chromatic scale and does it in very bite-sized chunk. I call them chromatic coaster exercises, and so it breaks it down into very, very small chunks. And the way that the guide is laid out, it's supposed to make them, think, okay, when you start the chromatic scale, you're doing the little mini coasters, like only a couple pitches, and it's like the really small roller coasters that the toddlers ride. And then by the time you get to the entire chromatic scale, you're basically riding the Incredible Hulk. And the reason I thought of roller coasters was we took our kids to Universal and they drugged me on the Incredible Hulk, even though I do not like heights or roller coasters. And so if anybody here is a roller coaster fan, I realized that the roller coaster I like to do are the launch coasters, the ones that go really, really fast and shoot you up, and not the ones that, go click, click, click all the way to the very top of the hill. So that's where 0 to 60 came from.
That's cool. And for people who are not watching and just listening to the audio version, the first page has the boxes of pitches that is sort of that's out of time, right?
Yeah, it's aleatoric, and so it basically takes those first couple notes of the chromatic scale, and it basically divides it up into different groups, and so they get to be aleatoric, but all the while they're reinforcing a bunch of chromatic fingerings.
Because every time they play that passage, they're practicing their chromatic scale.
Absolutely.
Love it. Let's listen to it. Here's 0 to 60. Okay, the next piece is a grade 2. It's a 3-minute fanfare called Fanfare for the Gold.
Yeah, this is this one. This was actually written about a year ago. It was when I completed this one. I wrote it for a local group here, the East Cobb Middle School Band. They were playing at the state GMEA convention, Georgia Music Educators, and a lot of people also recognize me for pieces like Shimmering Joy and Epic Venture, Anthem of an Era, and I love fanfares. Say what you want. I love a good fanfare, and I'm always looking for different ways to take that fanfare, to take the idea of a fanfare at this level. And so this one, it has a lot of the traits of what people I think really enjoy about pieces like Epic Venture and Anthem of an Era, but I tried to use a little bit more flexibility with some of the phrase lengths. So sometimes you might hear a 6-bar phrase instead of an 8-bar phrase. And so just try to play with everybody's predictability a little bit.
Where does the title come from? Fanfare for the Gold.
The title comes from, I think there's a lot of different things where, like for example, like the Olympics, people use the expression of going for the gold. And so for these students, they're playing at the state convention. It's like, that was kind of the one of the first things I thought of. And so it's just something that is supposed to be very aspirational. It gets students excited about, not just obviously achieving success. And we've spent a lot of time talking about, some of the successes that we can aspire to, whether that's, making All-State or winning a medal or playing at a big convention. But I think the thing that it tries to also highlight is that the journey of doing that is what's important, not just the thing that you're achieving. And so I think that's the overall meaning of the title for me.
Love it. Here's a grade 2 that you should do on your next concert to open it up, called Fanfare for the Gold. Okay, so the next piece is called Tale of the Sword, and it's grade 2.
Yes, and another commission by a local band here in the Cobb County area, which is where I live here in Atlanta, Georgia. And this one's commissioned by a good friend of mine, Tara Melvin, and Steve Cagle, who are at Autry Middle School. They're the Vikings. They're their school mascot. So that was obviously when they were doing a commission. That was one of the first things I thought of. I wanted to do something that kind of would bring up that kind of spirit. But the other thing too is much like with 0 to 60, much like with a lot of the pieces that I do, I really believe wholeheartedly in finding as many practical things to be teaching our students as possible. And
Sure.
if another piece has to exist at the grade 2 level, like what is a need that needs to be addressed? And one of the things that Tara mentioned right off the bat was that she wanted a reason to teach her students 6/8.
Yes,
And
100%.
so the Viking aspect of it, which is of course where the title "Tale of the Sword" comes from. But also paired with that is that it teaches 6/8, comes with rhythm charts that, again, even if your students have never played 6/8 before, you can pass out the rhythm charts. It's got a unison melody chart that goes with it, or a melody sheet. And I can also, this is one of the pieces we did it at my spring concert last year because I wanted to make sure that I actually was practicing what I preached. And so I was like, okay, I've never taught 6/8 before. Let's see if what I created actually works. And if I can teach 6/8 with my kiddos with this piece, then I think you can too. So
we need more 6/8 pieces, especially cool ones. So this is one of them. I do want to interject really quick. I've had a lot of success, and I was taught this many years ago. I forget who taught me. One of the best ways to teach 6-8 is to lock into what they already understand with nursery rhymes. Think of all the nursery rhymes kids already know. And literally, I have like 2 pages of a companion guide of just all these 6-8 tunes they already know. And then you can sit and learn them so they get used to it's the sound before sight, right? They understand, row your boat or whatever. Then you see the rhythms. Because how many rhythms are really in 6-8? I mean, if you
not
get
that many.
super complicated, like 8.
Yeah, I had an assistant director one time who even said, like, they're not saying that this is what we should do, but it almost begged the question, like, should we be starting our kids in 6-8 and then moving to 4-4? But you're right. If that's that's their first introduction to music a lot of times.
Just this morning, my son was picking up the stairs and he was just whistling, and it was a 6-8 tune. That's just in his head. I mean, it's just so. I think 6-8's very natural, and people just think that it's hard. But they just need to access what the kids already know. Anyway, I'm off my soapbox. Here is Tale of the Sword. Okay, so the last piece we're going to listen to of yours today is called Breakthrough, and it's grade 2.
Yes, and this was commissioned by the Nebraska 8th grade All-State Band, and was actually originally supposed to be premiered in 2021, but of course, like everything, because of the pandemic, we had to postpone it. And when I was thinking about a piece that I wanted to write at that level, this piece, what I love about this piece is that, much like a couple of the other pieces in my catalog, I love that this piece is technically accessible by middle school bands, but university groups and high schools play it just as much. And so I really love that. And so I'm glad that people think it sounds harder than it really is. But the title Breakthrough and the whole spirit of the piece is for these 8th grade students who basically were beginning band musicians when the pandemic had started.
Right.
And this is, by this point, it's 2022 is when the piece was written and premiered. And I just thought about, obviously us teachers, we went through so much during that time, but of course our students did too. And the fact that they have worked their way from being online and basically holding a brand new instrument for the first time ever to being an 8th grade all-state level player, that's obviously very special. But I wanted to write something that would actually celebrate the grit and the sweat and all the hard work that went into it, both from the teachers and from the kids too. And so that's what the piece is. It's talking about, achieving something, but it's the grit, it's the determination, it's the fact that to achieve something worthwhile, it's hard work. It just is going to take, it takes hard work. And so I think it's a good piece that embraces that spirit of grit and determination.
Okay, Tyler, hopefully those pieces are selling for you. And if not, they start selling a little bit more for you. People can reach out to you anytime, right?
Absolutely. You can contact me through my website, tylersgrant.com. The email comes right to me, and I'm always happy to chat with folks and just hear about what's going on in everybody's band programs.
A question I didn't prepare you for. What's your wait time on commissions right now if somebody wanted to commission you?
Oh, gosh. So right now I am booking commissions for the 2025 and 2026 school year. I always think of my commissions on an academic calendar basis. So this academic year and next academic year are full, but afterwards is when I'm starting to do things. And those commissions are everything from grade half through grade 5 and everything in between. I'm really happy to say. So always happy to collaborate with anybody at any level.
Well, that's great. I mean, how many composers are not able to write at all those levels?
Well,
That's
I
special.
think we just need more music at that level. You know, our kids, the needs of our ensembles and our students changes so much.
So besides being full for the next 2 years, what else coming up are you excited about?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm excited. This is obviously my first, as I mentioned, this is my first year as a full-time composer, conductor, publisher. And so what I'm most excited about is my self-publishing company. All my music now is self-published and distributed worldwide by Alfred Music, and it's available online through Make Music Cloud. I'm exclusive with Make Music Cloud, and a bunch of the resources that I create that go with the pieces are in the process of being uploaded onto the platform as well. And so being able to be a part of that and seeing some of the great work that's happening with Alfred Make Music and being able to collaborate with them, that's been something I've been really excited about. So everything that's going on with my own company, and then because I'm in my first year, my day 5 days a week right now is writing and creating content for my website and creating new music and composing. And so that's what's happening right now. Next semester, I think it's something bizarre, like 15 or 16 trips, whether those are state MEA conventions, the Midwest Clinic, conducting different honor groups. And so I will be hop, skipping, and jumping quite a bit around the country. So if anybody who's listening hears my name as to where I'm going to be, then I hope you'll come up and say hi. I would love to meet you.
That's awesome. Can I ask a stupid question?
Of course.
I don't know the answer.
I'm sure it's not stupid at all.
I've been a band director for 20 years, and I don't know this answer. So you're self-publishing, but
Yes.
it's available through Alfred.
Yes.
Can you tell us how that actually, like, it's on your computer? Do you just email the file and they take? So what makes self-publishing versus, like, do you go to Staples and print it and send it, or did they? Yeah.
So it is all the way that it works is basically every self-publisher is different. When I started self-publishing, it literally was me printing it at FedEx in college, and in the middle of the night, stuffing envelopes in my pajamas and mailing off the music. And so now I outsource to a printing company that is able to then provide the music, and then Alfred is in charge of all of the sales and distribution. So your favorite local music store, as long as they purchase Alfred product, then that means that they can get my music, and it's at an affordable rate for the band director. It's at a profitable discount or margin for the music store, and me as the publisher, it's a profitable margin as well. So it's everybody wins is the way I always approach it. And so because it's distributed by Alfred, then that helps be able to support music directors in local stores as well. And especially for those directors, like I mentioned, who are using platforms like Make Music Cloud, that distribution helps with that as well, where we can offer those projects digitally as well.
Which was formerly Smart Music, right?
Yes, formerly Smart Music's now Make Music Cloud.
Yep.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.